At this point, we have control over most every part of the dwarf hero's body. So we're looking pretty good. However, there's still one more piece that we have yet to create controllers for, and that is his eyeballs. And these are actually pretty easy to make, and it all starts, like all the other controllers, with some curves. So I'm going to go to the Curve Surface tab over here and create a circle. And I'll take it and drag it up to where his eyes might be. And I'm going to rotate it around 90 degrees. So I'm going to set this rotate X to 90 so I know it's exactly 90 degrees up and down. And move it around to where his eyes should be. And I'm going to place it kind of as far away back from his head as I have these knee controllers down here, these pull constraint controllers. And so that looks fine. And then I'm going to go into the 4 view and choose the front view here. And I'm going to focus in on that controller I just made. And this is going to be for his left eye. So I'm going to enlarge it a little bit. Basically what's going to happen here is when I move this around, it's going to tell his eyeball joint to rotate and point, or aim in our case, at this controller. So we can move just the controller around as if it's an object that he's actually looking at. And that comes in handy for animating the eyeballs. It's a very simple and easy way to do it. And because we already have our joints set up, we essentially just need to tell the joint to point at the controller, and our joint will be controlling the eyeball. So the whole effect should work very nicely. So for now, what we want to do is place this controller exactly at the center of this eyeball. So when we do the constraint, there's a constraint called the aim constraint. When we do that, the eyeball shouldn't move at all, or the joint isn't going to move at all. It's going to be pointing exactly the same way it's pointing right now, which is just straightforward, because that's how we made our joint. So just like we've done before, to snap this into the joint without actually changing its Z position, I'm going to hold down the V, and I'm going to grab this red handle here and pull that over, and that should snap right where we want it to be. And to make sure it's also aligned up and down, I'm going to grab this blue handle and do the same thing until that snaps onto that joint right there where there's a crisscross. So this should be lined up exactly with his left eyeball. And essentially you can imagine he's looking at it right now in his default position. And I'm going to go up to the channel box and take a look at the values we have here. To duplicate this onto the other eyeball, we're going to just take its X value here. We have a 3.4 X value, and we're going to invert that on our duplicated controller. So I'm going to grab the controller, press Shift D, that'll make a new controller, and then instead of 3.4 here, we're going to use negative 3.4. And because we mirrored our eyeball joints, we can be pretty sure that this controller being mirrored is going to be lined up exactly with that right eyeball. And you can double check by just jumping into the front view. And it looks pretty good to me. Nothing wrong with that. So now we have our 2 eyeball controllers. And I'm going to name them as such. So this one here, the one we just made, is the right icon. And then the one we previously made is the left icon. And that works just fine. And now we want to grab both of these, go to Modify, and freeze their transforms. And that will zero out those values so it's easier to animate. With these 2 controllers, we can control each eye individually, but generally speaking, when you look at something, both eyes move at the same time. So instead of having the animator grab both of these and animate these separately, we're going to create a parent object to control both of these eyes at the same time. And essentially what that's going to be is another controller surrounding these that they both get nested underneath of. They'll both be children of. So let's do it by creating a circle controller, bringing that up to where the eyes are. I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees. And that should be right in the middle there. So if we look at Translate X, we know that's centered. And I kind of want it to be centered so it looks symmetrical. And you can really make this any shape you want. I like making it kind of like a binocular. So I'll kind of square it off a little bit by grabbing those tangents. And then I'll squish it down just so it kind of encapsulates those circles. And that looks kind of nice, like a little viewer scope. So what we want is the animator can grab this, move it around wherever they want the character to look, and it will control both of these other controllers so both of the eyes move. And I want all 3 of these controllers to be on the same plane, so I'm going to go into the side view here. They're a little bit off-centered from each other. And I'm just going to hold down X and snap this to one of the grid lines. And I'll do the exact same by selecting our eyeball controllers, holding X and snap that. And now we have them snapped on the same exact plane, and they're kind of set within each other. Not necessary, but nice and clean looking, so I like to do it. And now we'll grab all of these guys again, because we've moved them. We want to go to Modify and Freeze Transforms again. And I want to name this one Icon. This will just be the eyeball controller, the entire thing. Now to make each individual eyeball controller follow, we'll grab them both, and then we'll lastly grab the parent controller and press P. Now all we need to do to move the eyeballs at the same time is grab this larger controller and move it around wherever we want the character to look. And this can be placed on an object in the scene and animated and moved around in a very convenient way so that the eyeballs will follow. And it's just a very simple, very easy way to get that eyeball animation going on our character. It also allows the animator to grab an individual eyeball and skew it off to the side if they really wanted to, if they wanted some sort of bug-eyed look or a cross-eyed look. And in a lot of cases, if an object is very close to the character's face, you want him to go cross-eyed so he can keep his focus. To get these eyeball joints actually following these controllers, we want to constrain the joints. And in this case, like I said, we will be using an aim constraint. And that's pretty self-explanatory. If you can imagine the joint aiming itself at our controller object and following wherever it moves, that's essentially what the constraint is doing. So we want to locate our actual eyeball joints. So I'm going to grab this here. We've actually grabbed the left upper eyelid joint, but that's pretty close, so I can still find it in the outliner. I'm going to press the F key, and that'll kind of open up all those different joints, and we can now locate our right eyeball and our left eyeball. And those are right there. So now that I have those located, I can first select the left eyeball controller, and then in the outliner I can control select the actual left eye joint. Now, making sure that you're in the rigging tool set, we go up to the constraint section and we grab our aim constraint. And when you click that, you'll see over here that our left eye joint now has these blue tick marks next to the rotate transforms. And that indicates that it will be rotating wherever it needs to rotate in order to stay aimed or aligned at this controller that we made. So to check it, you can click on the controller and you can move it over a little bit, and then you can click on the left eye joint and you can see that it has rotated to lock on to that controller that we made. So it's working. It's very simple. It's working just fine. And when we paint weights and we have these eyeballs actually moving inside the head, it'll be a lot more apparent that that's working. But that's how you can check to make sure before we've actually painted weights. And now we'll do the exact same thing for the right eyeball. I will grab the right eyeball controller, and in the outliner I'll find the right eye joint, and I can simply hit the G key to redo my last action. And that will do the same exact thing. It's applied an aim constraint from the joint to the controller. And if you want to check again, you can move this controller around a little bit and then check on the right eye joint and see that it has rotated to aim at that controller. If you applied these constraints and you happen to notice while selecting the eye joints that there had been rotation values added when you applied the constraint, that simply means that your controller is not actually aligned with the joint perfectly. So you can leave it, it's not a big deal if it's not too far out of whack, or you can delete the constraint by going to the outliner, and underneath the joint you can delete this constraint object and reposition the controller and reconstrain. So it's not too big a deal, but if you do notice that, you can always correct it. But it looks like in this case we're all set here. Now there is a way to animate the eyeballs looking at things. He can look around any which way he'd like, and it should work just fine for our character. And at this point, we're done with all the controllers. We no longer have to add any controllers. But what we will do from here is take all of our controllers that we made and create a hierarchy so that it's more organized in here, and each of these controllers have a relationship with each other so that the skeleton moves properly when you move individual controllers.